So, hello. Wireless mouse not working. Good start. I'm the Willy Bastard, also named Ode Fischer. I work at Mobile Ambitions, a little Danish company where I have the title Developer Alien Technologies. That's the same as iPhone developer, but yeah. During my work, I had to do a plugin because I had some really heavy storage needs that web storage can't do, and then I want some advanced control of it. Irony of it, well, today we actually don't use any of it because our customer changed the paradigm. But why I do plugins is basically when you need to extend what JavaScript can't do. I talked with the Facebook guy, he mentioned something about audio problems, and that might be solvable by a plugin. Otherwise, maybe if you need advanced storage solutions where you do advanced queries using SQLite or something similar, then a plugin might also be the way to do it, especially if you need more speed than JavaScript can provide. A basic plugin recipe is basically you create a class and whatever methods you need, basic for whatever language you use, for instance Objective-C, no magic there. Then in Objective-C you map the plugin from some variable name to the class using Cordova plist. Basically just two strings telling what you call it in JavaScript and what the class is named, nothing there. And then you call the plugin using JavaScript. So basically no magic. So let's try and do it. So I created a basic Cordova PhoneGap project. The only thing I've changed here is that I removed the example code with a really simple HTML file. Might show that first. It includes Cordova and my plugin code. Then it has a button that runs the run plugin. That's in the JavaScript. And then a div for whatever response I choose to write. And then I have the plugin example having the run plugin and some code I'll explain in a moment. In Objective-C, or in Xcode and in Objective-C, I created a class named plugin examples. It extends CDV plugin, which is the base class for plugins in Cordova. And then I created a simple, my simple plugin method, something, it should have a name of some kind. And it takes an mutable array of arguments and a dictionary. The dictionary is, as far as I came to understand, a legacy thing from previous versions. So actually you only use the array. And then I have a simple class. What it does right now is just write a log text to the console saying hello there, just so we know that we actually have a link from JavaScript to the plugin. In JavaScript, I run a sort of magic method named Cordova exec. It takes a success callback. I haven't defined that currently, and an error callback, and then some magic name for PG plugins, I decided to name it. So let's map the plugin to the Objective-C code. So I'll just take the right file. Here we got an array of plugins, and the only thing I need to do is write PG plugins, because that's what I named it in JavaScript, and then plugin example, because that's what I named it in Objective-C. As you can see, you got all the Cordova plugins down here, and you can see what aliases they use in if you run it the manual way. Of course you don't, because of course you use the wrappers that they have made to make it easy. So let's try. Now I have mapped it, so let's try and run this. Yeah, we got a simulator, and I do run plugin, and I did something wrong. Good start. Try the copy paste just to, yeah. plugin examples. Good. Let's get a spell checker next time. There. And there you can see the hello there I added to the NSLog. So really nothing magic. You got the JavaScript executing the plugin with PG plugins, that's the ones used to map, and the method name in Objective-C. So if we go back here. Now, this example isn't really that interesting because only thing it does is write to the log, right? So let's add some JavaScript to it. And then we call self.writeJavaScript. And basically we can do hello audience, then semicolon. And then when I run it, hopefully, it will do an alert. So that's how you get communication back. Now, how do you get information to this? Let's add an argument. Arguments is just a simple array of JavaScript types, strings, numbers, etc. So let's add a string and write OK. So, and we want to see that OK in our alert instead. So, have to get used to the Mac shortcuts. So now I do an NS string and string with format, and then alert, and then the format string. I think I need those. And then our argument. Now we need something to store our argument in, so I'll do an NS string argument, and then I take our array of arguments. And I get the object at index 1. There is an object at index 0, but that's a special one we'll take in a moment. So if I run this, it should say OK. Easy peasy, right? So now let's raise the bar a bit. Now we'll add callbacks. First off, I'll take the JavaScript and then add the callbacks. What these do is basically add an error message or add a success message. And the error message includes a nice picture. So let's try to add these. And error. In Objective-C, now we get the special first argument. And a string, callback, arguments. Hope you survive. Don't use too much time on the params. So let's go in and take these four. Okay, what I do here is it's just the same as this one. So what I do here is check if the input is equals OK. If I do that, I create a new CDV plugin result. That's a special wrapper class that Cordova has created to make use of these result callbacks. These two ones I set here. And if input string is equals to OK, we write a simple result with status OK, message a string good, and then we create the result script and tell it to use the success callback. If we can't write OK correctly, I'll just write an error message. I vote for natural selection as the error message, and then store that in, and send that to the error callback. Lastly, we have to write this to the JavaScript, otherwise it won't know it. So let's try to do this. And if I run the plugin, I did something wrong. I forgot to save this file. Good with problems. And it says I vote for natural selection. I couldn't write OK correctly. Good. So let's look. I made a capital O. So let's try to see what happens if I write it right. And it says success, good. So, so this is basically how you do the communication back and forth. Let's see how many minutes. I got 5 minutes? 10, okay. There is 2 other ways to do callbacks back to JavaScript because, well, in some cases, what you don't want is the normal callbacks. Maybe you want an event structure. Maybe you have something that runs threaded in the background and sends events. If you've used the connection events, for instance, this is a great example of this. So let's try and do an event. So basically, I start by altering my JavaScript, where I create a simple event handler. Yet again, I named my event bastard event. So I write bastard event received to the div, and then I do the call. In Objective-C, let's try to remove this. This becomes noise by now. Okay, there I do self-write JavaScript. Then Cordova have a magic function that I found checking how they did their event structures. Quite easy way to know how to solve problems. Look what others did. This code isn't that scary, actually. So I saw they have a fire document event. They also have a fire window event, if you prefer that. And here I do, let's do the basic one first. So here I just execute a basic bastard event and send it to the Cordova. Let's check I saved it this time. Okay, saved, and let's try to run it. And hopefully, oh, you're right. Let's fix this. Thank you. Let's try again. And then it does a bastard event received. But what if you need to pass some parameters? Well, Cordova has thought about it. So you can actually add a simple JSON object. Nothing magic here. Basic JSON, or not JSON, JavaScript object. I'll give you an offer you can't refuse as a string and an image, just, proof of concept. So here I'll try to need to take the data and then do data.text, and let's see, yeah, it was an image. So then we do like this, maybe new line so you can see what I'm writing, and then plus data.image plus, I think that should do. So let's try to pass some data back to the event and see if it works. It does. So, yeah. Don't know, I also did a basic callback example. Do we have time for that too? Yeah. Okay, I'll try to see if we can do the custom callback. And a great thanks to Phil Mai for helping me solve this problem, although I didn't get to use it in practice back then, but still. Let's see, I'll replace the entire JavaScript for this one. So, and still it's pretty basic JavaScript. I'd create a new bastard object. I add an object called callbacks where I store the callbacks. I have a run callback where I give an ID of the callback, and when it gets an ID, it looks up the callback and calls it. When I do run with callback, I add the ID. Here I just named it foo. You should probably use, if you do this, some kind of ID generator, ensuring that you create a unique ID. And then I simply add the callback. The reason for not passing this to the Objective-C is you can't pass a JavaScript method through the arguments. So I do a PG plugins and my sim plugin and add the ID to the argument list. So let's try to make this callback work. So we start by in a string. Let's call it callback ID. I'm not too used to Objective-C. Arguments object at index 1. Good. And then we should be able to do a self-write JavaScript. And then look, I called it bastard.runCallback. So let's use the right shortcuts for a start, and then use, I need to do a string with format if I can figure this max shortcuts out. And a string with format, then add the callback ID, and CPID I called it. And if I added a quote that shouldn't be there. Better add quotes to this one. So if I've done everything all right, we should be able to run the callback. No. What do I actually add to the callback? Thank you. I should add autosave to that one. Yeah, callback works. One last thing I'll add to this. Actually, I cheated a bit because I just run the Cordova exec directly. The nice way to do it, at least I consider it the nice way, and it's what they tend to do on the plugin repository on GitHub, is you create some kind of object. This is a stripped version of one of these I use at my work. And there, to that object, I add a prototype that actually wraps the Cordova exec in a nice way. And then I create an install constructor where I ensure that window.plugins is defined. And I define mobamp cache. And then I just return the mobamp cache and then tells Cordova about my plugin. You can, now I hope the internet works. One thing you shouldn't count on in a conference, but if you go to the GitHub at PhoneGap Plugins, there's a lot of examples. And if it works, wow, it works. So there you can actually see more or less examples of this way of creating it. This one creates some result types for some asynchronous. But basically, if you look at the bottom, it adds some kind of constructor that adds this to the Cordova framework. And one last thing, I think. Yeah. I recommend I created a GitHub repository where I tried to add the code earlier today that I've been using in this presentation. If anyone wants to look at the examples, I'll gladly add it. Just write me something. Otherwise, I recommend the GitHub for PhoneGap with PhoneGap plugins. And you can also go to the PhoneGap channel at Freenode. I know Phil Mai hangs out there a lot, and he knows a bit about the plugins. So, time for questions, or?
Oh, yeah, we definitely have time for a couple questions while Ian gets set up. So, awesome talk. And
okay.
Thank you. Live coding with 2 IDEs. It's pretty awesome. Eclipse and Xcode.
Yeah, well, I really, really don't like Xcode. My girlfriend once asked me, why do I code in iTunes? Then my answer was I was forced to, but yeah.
So do we have any questions out there for, oh, of course, right here. Oh, just a sec.
Wait for the
we'll get you
mic
a
so everyone can hear.
So if you've got a native plugin, is there anything you can't do? Are there any JavaScript limitations that stop you doing anything that you could natively on the iPhone, for instance?
I guess
We haven't found it yet.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, binary between the two, for sure.
Yeah, but
marshalling,
you could still base 64 encode them, couldn't you?
we have done that in crashed phones.
Ah, okay. Theoretically,
Large
you
amounts
should
of
be
data
able
over the
to.
bridge is going to fail.
Yeah.
But what you can do then is just write that data to a shared memory space and send a message and say, hey, this thing's been written there. Like we used to send image data over the bridge, and that was stupid. It was okay, and then phones started to get bigger cameras, and more than 2 megapixels worth of data over a URL didn't work.